time. So it's a good time of year to celebrate and to just take it all in. So thank you for being here. I know your time is very precious, and we're delighted that you have chosen to spend it with us. And each and every week we bring you such interesting shows. Sometimes I'm here just by myself, bringing you a topic, something to explore, something to expand our thinking, our hearts, our minds about. And other times I bring you the most incredible guests. So with that, I'm going to introduce my guest in just a second. I want to say hi to Amnon.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Oh my
Good
goodness,
afternoon.
you got me there. I'm like,
Afternoon.
oh yes, good afternoon. How are you?
Fine. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Happy belated Easter. Happy Passover.
Happy everything.
Happy everything. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday and Easter and Passover to everybody out there. Hope you celebrated really lovely with your family and your friends, and you ate good food and you went on Easter hunts and had a good time. Right?
Right.
All right. So on with the show. And I want to remind everyone this is your show. So please feel free during the show, any point in time, to give us a call anytime you want. You can call us at 919-518-9773. That's if you have access to a phone and a phone line. Or you can Skype in with us anytime you like to computers, that's plural, 2K voice, right?
Right. And don't worry about it. People normally associate Skype with video.
Oh, yeah, right.
Computers 2K voice says that it's only audio. We're not going
right.
to see you, so don't
Yes.
worry.
So you can be in your PJs.
Yeah.
It's quite all right. But anytime you have a comment, you have a question, because you might have a comment or a question or two during this show. You are going to want to call us, and we are going to want to have you call us. So please feel free to do that. And you also can take part in our chat, which is right next to the video. You can put your name, nickname, whatever you like, and then there's all kinds of comments and things going on there. So feel free to engage with us as much as you like, and we'll certainly take questions out of the chat. So I want to introduce to you Dr. Denee Jordan, who's been a clinical psychologist, licensed clinical psychologist for 26 years. And I am so delighted to have her. You're going to love it. So take notes. This is going to be fun, and you're going to learn, and you're going to take notes, and it's going to be a show that you will take away something major, I'm telling you, for that fact. So with that, let me introduce Dr. Denee Jordan. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you. We had a lot of time to chat before the show, and I'm excited because I kept saying, oh, no, we can't talk about that, or no, we can't talk about that because I want to talk about it here with all of you. So, Denee, why don't you give a little bit of background about who you are so our audience has a good concept of who they're listening to and who they're going to learn from?
Okay. Well, as you said, actually, that 26 years has now grown into closer to 30. Sometime I'm going to have to change that. Time has been flying by. But I've been a psychologist and a marriage and family therapist now for about 30 years. And I've worked with all sorts of different populations in all sorts of different environments. And I've mostly worked in the public sector, which means I've mostly worked with at-risk families, inmates, emotionally disturbed children, and the very seriously mentally ill. And really, in the whole course of that, what I've learned is that we're all basically the same as human beings. And we all want to feel safe, valuable, and connected. And the way that we do that is very different. And to feel safe, valuable, and connected, and working with that premise with my clients really led me to create a perspective that I call already well.
So first of all, before we go into already well, what led you to becoming a clinical psychologist in this arena?
Well, that's an interesting story. Probably you haven't heard before. I'm actually a retired ballet dancer. And I danced for about 30 years. And so I traveled a lot and knew that at some point in time I was going to need to make a better living than I was making. So while I was traveling, I went to 9 different colleges and took classes here and there. I mean, all over the country, in Hawaii, And finally, I went to a counselor that said, you know, Denee, you almost have a bachelor's degree in psychology. And I said, that sounds fun. I love people. Um, and really, that's what started my direction towards being a psychologist. Obviously, after getting a bachelor's degree, I needed to focus more time and retired from dancing and went ahead and pursued my master's degree and my doctorate in psychology.
That is a
So,
fascinating story.
so my career was chosen for me, we can say.
Yeah, I wonder how many of our careers have been chosen for us as well.
Right.
Really.
It's true.
So that's an interesting story. So ballerina, becoming a psychologist.
Yes.
That's a really great story. So,
Thank you.
so what is Already Well?
Already Well is a wellness perspective that says that before we change anything about ourselves, before we try to lose weight, before we try to become more enlightened, before we try to uh, improve ourselves in any kind of a way, we will be much more successful if we stop and recognize how incredibly magnificent we already are in the moment. So I think of Already Well as kind of a stopping point. It's a pause we take before we do anything else that sets us up for success. So it's recognizing our magnificence, including the things we think are wrong with us, the things that we think we've done that we're ashamed of, our failures, our successes. When we look at the whole thing carefully, we understand that everything we've done has been because we're human beings, trying our very best. And when we can look at our lives with acceptance and compassion, for a moment, just recognize how magnificent we already are, we have 100% better chance of achieving what it is we want.
So I understand you work with several different populations. So
Yes.
you've worked with schizophrenia, eating
Yes.
disorders, addictions, I mean, it sounds like you really do work with all kinds, and you go from one end to the other, and it doesn't matter because you work a whole person. I understand
Yes,
that,
yes,
right? So
yes.
however that person is manifesting, or whatever their um, what do you call it? What you don't call what do you call it? Not it. You don't call schizophrenia. What do you call schizophrenia?
Schizophrenia is a serious mental illness.
Mental illness. So whether they have a
Yes,
mental illness or an emotional illness or some disease of some sort or
that,
imbalance, you work a
yes.
whole person. So how do you work with Already Well with somebody who? What's the worst? What's the most difficult population to work with to understand what Already Well is?
Well, like I said, I think really what I've come to see is that when I sit down and talk to people, regardless of what's wrong with them, we're just so much the same.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really what the outside world thinks is the worst. I think what the outside world would look at and think was the worst was probably schizophrenia. And so most people that have schizophrenia, that have been in the system for any length of time, uh, what the normal, in quotes, the normal world tries to help them with is their symptoms. And the normal world, or the regular world, sees these people as really sick and says, what can we do to help you with your symptoms?
So you're talking about band-aiding.
I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
about really focusing on what's negative.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what they're doing, what they're not doing, hearing their voices, not getting a job, being homeless, saying crazy things, making scary choices. These are all the things that are the focus of treatment, and I don't think they should be. I think they're important, but I like to sit down with anyone as a whole human being and say, tell me about you. And what I will discover is that no matter who we are, we have done incredible things. And even the craziest things we've done, we have a reason for them inside of us. And that we all have worked very, very, very hard to survive. So actually, I specialize in schizophrenia. And when I began to focus on my clients' strengths, when I began to focus on what it was they can do, on the remarkable human beings they are, on their artistry, on their humor, on their interesting ways of looking at things, and I began to give them credit for that. I began to really emphasize their whole person. They started to get better, and that they were really my first group of teachers in this using this perspective.
Yes.
They're amazing.
Yeah,
Uh,
you're so right because sometimes people will say when you're writing a blog, excuse me, address a problem. In writing how to get rid of this or how to get rid of that. And I always have a hard time doing that. All the
mhm,
marketers will say address a problem, to
mhm.
draw attention to whatever you're writing. And I've always had a hard time doing that because I don't want to start with the problem.
Exactly. Right. And really, when we look at it, a problem is not a problem.
Right.
A problem is that the way that we're trying to resolve something isn't working. I like to look at it as a skill set. If I have a problem in my life, it means that my perspective needs to change, my behavior needs to change, but it's not because I'm bad or wrong. It's because I'm missing a skill that I need to resolve something in a loving, more productive way.
All I can say is yes. Yes, that's all yes, I totally get that. So thank you so much for putting it that way because that really does make a difference. So,
There aren't any bad people. I'm sorry.
yeah, no, you're
There
right.
are people that for some reason are broken, and maybe it isn't possible for them to mend in a way that is going to be adequate for them to function. But generally speaking, we aren't born bad. We're born as gracious masterpieces.
Right. And I really agree with you there. And I always think that people are here to learn whatever they're supposed to learn, teach whatever they're supposed to teach. So everything is supposed to be, for me, be the way it is. And
Yes.
and I love the idea of it being a skill set.
Mm-hmm.
Because like because I look at some people and I'll go, okay, well, they're having issues with their coping skills. That's all.
Yes.
It's not that something's wrong with them. They just haven't figured out how to or learned how to cope. So
Yes.
let's do some practical coping skills.
And I'd like to mention that Already Well really emphasizes that generally, at least the main problem we have is that we attempt to change ourselves by beating ourselves up. We attempt to change ourselves using criticism, using threats we make, putting ourselves down, beating ourselves up. In the Already Well practice, we call it fighting ourselves. I cannot fight myself well. I can only love myself well. And I like to use obesity as an example because I think so many people can understand it. The way that people try to lose weight is by feeling like fat pigs, by beating themselves up, by criticizing themselves, by looking in the mirror and saying horrible things, by reminding themselves that they're hurting their health. And That's the reason that the weight loss industry makes so much money, is because when we fight ourselves, we lose.
Yeah, there's no
The-
way we can angry ourselves to wellness.
we cannot angry ourselves to wellness,
There's
and
just
we
no
can
way.
and we can't angry parts of ourselves away either.
No, no.
Things I don't want to look at about myself, I just I I call it shutting them out in the rain. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I put 17 bolts on the front door because I don't want to look at my extra weight on my body. And
Right.
so what happens is it just starts banging on the door. You know, the parts of myself I don't want to embrace just start banging on the door.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll drink some alcohol or take drugs or work like a work fiend in order to avoid facing myself.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's like we can't create peace from war.
We can't. We can't.
No, we
It,
can't.
it, it's Isn't that amazing, Marilyn, really how simple that is? We keep trying to fight our way to peace in the world. We try to fight our way to peace inside ourselves.
Yep.
We think that if we win the war, we'll find peace, and we do that personally, interpersonally as well.
Yeah, I agree. I'll often say to people, "Well, God, you're going to listen to somebody who's yelling at you? I mean, you can't listen to, how are you going to listen to somebody who's yelling at you? So if you're not, why would you yell at yourself?"
Yes, and we do.
And we do. And I think so it's so beautiful to know that, somebody, we had a beautiful woman on the show, I don't know how many years ago, and her last name was Sykes, Dr. Sykes. She did a TED talk, and she's schizophrenic,
Oh,
and
I love it.
she was amazing.
Hmm.
She's a law professor, and she
Oh,
described what it was like
I
to.
know this woman.
You do?
Yeah, I'm familiar with her. I'm embarrassed I can't remember her name.
Her
She is
She's
amazing.
amazing. Her last name is Sykes.
Yes.
Dr. Catherine Sykes, Elizabeth Sykes, something. She was amazing. I mean, when she left the show, I had a
Hmm.
whole new attitude about mental illness because
Yes.
I saw that she was no different.
Hmm.
Seeing her in the way I saw her, she was no different. She
Right.
explained what it was like when she wasn't on her meds, and she explained what it was like when she was on her meds.
Hmm.
And the love that she has around her, she has a loving husband, and it's whatever it is, mental illness, and she's a remarkable woman and able to talk about it in such a way that it brought it home. It wasn't
Yes.
just out there in a way that I couldn't grasp. She brought
Hmm.
it in so I could touch it, you know?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. It's amazing. And another thing too is we love to talk about them, them with mental illness and them. It's so interesting to me even today to sit very professional um, in a very professional clinical meeting with all of us normal people, of which none of us are, sitting around talking about what we need to do for those really sick people. And mental illness, I mean, mental illness, we all have mental illness, meaning that if the definition is that we're having trouble functioning in life, we all do. And I like to look at it more as a continuum. Like, where am I on the continuum? Not necessarily am I healthy or not, but we all struggle with being human beings. It's not easy. We all have depression at times. Uh,
Ellen Sachs. Yeah. You know,
that's right. That's right.
her name is Ellen Sachs.
I actually went to a training she gave.
Uh huh.
Um, but we're all on the continuum, in my opinion.
Right.
And if we don't think we are, we're in denial.
So let me ask you something about you personally,
Sure.
because I can see that you have this perception, this very keen, intuitive perception. and it flows out of you. You have the words, you understand, you really understand it. Really, really, really understand it. So when you are in those environments, do you find your what do you do? Do you share? Do you are you busting out of your skin to share? What do you do in bringing forth this information into those arenas? Because it's a whole new, I don't even want to say mindset, but it's a
Mm.
whole new understanding. You know, it's a clarity. It definitely makes perfect sense to me what you're saying. Well, how do you let people around you know what about this?
Well, I think getting older has really helped because when I was younger, I think my own self-righteousness, my own arrogance would hop in and I would say something controversial and be a little defiant in these arenas. In the very beginning of my career, I wouldn't have dared say anything, of course, because I'm just going to be blunt, there were male psychiatrists there, and there was a real hierarchy in those days. Things have gotten better. Um, we call that the medical model. And it was gender split at that time, much more than it is now. But as I've gotten older, I mean, when I say we're all on the continuum, I understand that that includes everybody in the room as well. So I use humor, and I can use, having been in the business now for 30 years, I can claim a little bit of, um, I can be
Authority?
more, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, but usually humor in a
sure.
humorous way. You know, I can say, like all the crazy people that are sitting around the table right now, things like that. And
Interesting.
people are better. I mean, I think that our consciousness generally, our humanistic consciousness has changed. I've seen it change and improve in the last 30 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Our willingness, just generally as human beings, to be more open about our own shortcomings, have a little more humility has gotten easier.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would imagine that through the years that you have been doing this, you've been writing, you've been known for this, and people are perking up to listen because there's so much to learn and to understand that we
Yes,
didn't always understand before, and there's so
right.
much more that we are being faced with.
Yes, yes,
You know,
yes.
so I think what your work is so impactful. And I have a
Thank you.
question on the chat, and I want to remind everyone to please feel free to call in 919-518-9773 if you have a question or a comment of any kind, or you can certainly take part in the chat. Just write your name. But the question is from Suziani, and she's asking. She said she knows. Let's see. She said that if people are being diagnosed with, if they're taking a celiac test, if you know anything about that, that they're being diagnosed. Let's see. Let me see if I understand. When diagnosed, especially with illnesses like schizophrenia, do they do a celiac test or a test for histamine load and sensitivity? She said she knows of 3 people treated for mental illness that they did not have that and they
Right.
disappeared once they were diagnosed.
Yes, yeah, there are some really incredibly well documented stories. Again, I don't have the information at hand, but there was a story that I read online not too long ago of a young lady who was diagnosed with mental illness and treated with, and she was very young. I think she was diagnosed at like 16 and treated for a number of years with very serious antipsychotics. And as it turned out, she had another illness, and I forget what it is, but it was a medical illness, and it was related to the histamine in her brain. As a matter of course, those tests are not being done yet. No, they aren't. Um, I'm sure in certain circles they're done more, but I will say, working in mainstream, Los Angeles County is the largest mental health department of mental health the country. That those tests are not being run as a matter of course.
Really
No.
interesting. I guess I'm just making a judgment, but we're spending so much time on trying to just fix it. We're
Right.
not looking beyond. So tell me, what are some of the challenges that you have faced, and that brought you where you are, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I think the main obstacle for me that has circled back around and kind of brought my whole career together is I was a successful psychologist, and I was dancing actually at the same time for a number of years, and I was doing all these things and getting promotions at work, and I couldn't be happy.
Yeah.
And so when I mentioned schizophrenia in developing already well, which dovetailed really into at the time my own crises. And that crisis was that I was completely depressed, um, drinking too much, having a very hard time, and I would go to work and fix all the sick people. And the truth is that my life was not working, and I had to get off the roller coaster. I had uh, I had done everything I could to be successful, Marilyn, and I was miserable. And I had to realize that I also interpersonally was not looking at my whole humanness. And that until I could recognize that I was already successful, I was already magnificent, I was already a perfect example of a human being, I was not going to be able to find the happiness and contentment in my life that I needed. So those two things dovetailed together to create already well.
Ah, yeah, you brought a smile to my face. I was thinking of having seen Eckhart Tolle years ago in a conference, and he sat on the, the stage for just maybe it was 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and said nothing. And the
Mm-hmm.
name of the conference was In the Pursuit of Happiness. And he
Mm-hmm.
said, that's not right. Because if we're
Right.
always in pursuit, we're not there. So you just struck a chord with
Right.
me when you were talking about our
Yes.
humanness, because if we're in the pursuit of humanness, we're never going to be. We're never. What's pursuit mean? We'll never.
Right.
We've got
Yeah.
to accept it now.
Exactly. And to become successful carries with it the implication that we aren't,
Mm,
and with the implication that we're not, we never will be. And
exactly.
I do want to emphasize, having worked with this concept now for a number of years, that it sounds easy, but it's not. We are so brainwashed, so indoctrinated into believing that who we are, what we have, even if is not enough. We fight everything. We fight cancer. We fight poverty. We fight. When you fight, you can't win. I'm a cancer survivor. Okay, cancer wasn't fighting me. Cancer, in fact, was my body's not healthy but very natural reaction to the way I was living. Cancer wasn't my enemy. I was my enemy. And I was going to fight cancer, and I was going to fight to get ahead in my life. And even as you and I speak right this minute, to acknowledge our own resistance right this second to being absolutely magnificent. I don't know about you, but my head instantly goes into the other 6 things I have planned to do today. Can I accept my magnificence with all of my flaws and my faults right this second? It takes practice. It's difficult to do.
So what are some of the things that you did, or that you would suggest, or give us a taste of what somebody can do? Like, I know when we first were starting to talk before the show started, I was saying some things and I said, no, that's not what I want to say. I heard myself say things that just doesn't fit anymore. And I
Right.
very often, even I could be standing up in front of a room full of people, and my mouth will start, but right, and then but my soul, or my
Right.
energy, or my whatever you call it, I don't know what it is, will hear it and say, no, Marilyn, that's not where you are anymore. Or that's not the message you want to put out to yourself or somebody else. So I will stop myself in the middle, and I will use humor or whatever, or share. exactly why I
Yeah, good
stopped.
for you.
You know, so what would you suggest? Well, people are
Bravo.
listening. What are some practical things people can do to work on this acceptance?
Well, in my practice, what I do is I have my clients name their characters. And I had mentioned earlier on, we we lock out excuse me, we lock out some of our characters in the rain. Excuse me, maybe our temper. Um, we lock out the person that overeats. I'm going to cough 1 second, excuse me. We lock out parts of ourselves and that we don't want to face them. So I have named the parts of my personality. I have Cosmosia, I have Roger the Rager, I have Verna Eterna, my vanity, I have Miss Vigil, my critic, and I have named all these characters and have gotten to know them very, very well. So even using what you just said as an example, when you're up behind the podium and you're talking to a group of people, you can just stop and say, "Oh, excuse me, that was Bonnie."
And what does that do then? Does that what does that do for you? What does that offer you to do that?
Well, first of all, it contains it, so I can actually see it. And it's not the same as having multiple personality disorder, but it makes it much. It's actually more fun. It makes it much easier for me to see how I've developed defense mechanisms, because that's usually who's speaking when I'm not telling my real truth, are my defense mechanisms. I can watch Roger. Roger has become a family a family joke, because and people close to me will say, "I almost saw my Roger," because Roger is my anger, and is a persona that I have. And we can see how, like, let's say someone is really having a trouble getting a job. I'll say, well, we'll talk, and I'll say, tell me about that. The person that always says the wrong thing on the job interview. Or I'll say, talk to me about that part of yourself that makes sure that you just don't quite get what you're after. And they'll say, of course, at first, I don't understand. And I'll say, tell me about that personality. Tell me about them. And they'll say, well, his name's Benji. Yeah, tell me about him. What does he say to you? So bringing the characters uh, gives them focus. We can have dialogue with them better, and we can invite them in. Ram Dass, famous Ram Dass says, invite your enemies in for tea, and that's what I do with Already Well.
Very interesting. That's very interesting. So it's a cool way of labeling something so we can identify it.
Yes, yes. It's called making real to heal. We make it real to heal.
Interesting. And so could you show like, let's say I wrote down what is it, Cosmosia?
Yes.
So what is
Cosmosia.
Yeah.
Yes. Cosmosia is the airy fairy. She's the not of this world part of me. She loves spirits, and she's like this. Cosmosia loves everyone. She wants to bring in the sages and the spirits and invite everyone to harmonize and be peaceful. That's Cosmosia.
So who are you? So my question
I
is,
am,
who are you?
good question. I am Denee Jordan, and I am a perfect blend of mammal and spirit. I'm a perfect blend of my ego, which I don't believe we can get rid of or transcend. I'm a perfect blend of my ego and my spirit. And my ego and spirit come together. I call my spirit my wise woman. My wise woman and my spirit come together to run my life. And Denee is an integration of all of those characters. I've integrated my cosmic self. I've integrated with love my vanity. I've integrated with love my very hard on me critic. I've integrated these characters, and when they spring up in my life, I can identify them.
So you, Denee,
Yes.
are when Denee is acknowledging your angry side or your this side or your that side,
Mm-hmm.
you are accepting of those sides, right?
Absolutely.
Because you're all okay, and so you are
Yes.
able to there so you're able to move forward and not have that side take over because Danae is all.
Love it.
Is that right?
Marilyn, that's perfect. Yes, because when we make friends with ourselves, the wise part of us naturally emerges. My wise woman is running my life much more than she ever did. And when I am accepting myself with love and compassion, my wisest part of myself can run my life. When I
Interesting.
reject parts of myself, when I reject the part of me that overeats, when I reject her, she just gets worse.
Right. You know, I read this a book a couple of months ago. I guess I started in November. It was called 40 Days of Miracles by Melody Beattie. Are you familiar with it?
Yes, I am.
It's interesting because the premise is to every day write down what you are grateful for that day, and you are grateful for everything. You are grateful for, being angry. You're grateful
Mhm.
for having an explosion. You're grateful for being confused. You're grateful for all the parts of yourself,
Yes,
right? So that you're grateful for the confusion because it does this, or you're grateful, whatever it is,
yes.
whatever you're learning from it. And it was really, the process was amazing for me because
Hmm.
even things that would normally have really bothered me began to make so much sense,
Right.
you know, and
Yes.
people too. If
Hmm.
I was dealing with a difficult person, I could be
Yes.
grateful for that person or whatever was being difficult. I was learning something from it, so I could be grateful for the learning that came from the
Right.
difficulty. It was
Yes.
extremely helpful to me.
Right. And what you have done is I mentioned earlier that I have this one woman show I'm now performing. And
Yes.
this whole process with getting to know the characters and making peace with them is is what the whole show is about.
And so, talk to us some about this theater that you do, because you're so creative, and you are, you know, I guess so much of this fairy kind of person. Tell
Well,
us about the theater, and yeah.
what's nice about the theater is I've been able to bring my so many years on stage together with psychology and with my desire to really help folks. And the play is about I have actually on the stage there's a row of 6 chairs facing upwards. They're not facing the audience. And on top of the chairs are a series of 6 wigs and music. And I introduce all these characters. I actually act them out and speak with the audience in between each character. And, Danae, my natural self, talks about what it's like to really live with Roger the Rager. And Roger the Rager in the play is a pretty foul mouthed, outrageous sort of guy. I mean, he wears a black leather jacket and, you know, says the F word and he's angry, and the play shows how I embrace him and I thank him for his anger. And I say in the play, "Thank you for keeping me safe when I didn't know what else to do."
Let me interrupt you 1 second. So, who is your
Sure.
audience? Who comes to this?
It's a regular theater audience.
Okay.
We had 6 performances in Hollywood at the Lounge Theater and the Hudson Theater. We will be performing at the Hollywood Fringe Festival in June. And hopefully we'll be going to New York actually in the fall or the winter.
So doing this theater, how has that impacted your life?
Oh, tremendously. Um, for one thing, it has pushed me. We all, I think, have that edge
Mm-hmm.
where we might go up to it, but we're not going to cross it. As far as taking risks in our lives, as far as maybe, um, being afraid and going forward. And this play has definitely pushed me past my edge. So as a human being, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to grow.
So do you have a character that does push to the edge? Or is that Denee?
No,
It's Denee.
It's Denee's willingness to take this whole story. It's very personal. There isn't much that's left unrevealed about my own struggles, about my own shortcomings, and to just put it on stage for all to see in an effort to encourage other people to do the same thing. And this show is connected to a workshop. So people can opt to come to a workshop where we go through a very similar process with them themselves in a much safer, more intimate environment where there, of course, is not an audience.
Right. Except for themselves. Yeah,
Yes,
they're
there's
the
only
biggest audience.
yes, and they become a group, and we actually work with their characters and develop them and share them. But it's in an intimate, very safe, supported workshop.
Lovely. I love the whole idea. And there's a question. We have a question. So, do you find that certain clients are more responsive to your making it real to heal approach?
Uh, I would say that everybody is very open to it eventually. Um, I have found that 99% of the people that I work with, if I am authentic with them, they feel safer and are more willing to be authentic with me. I think the secret is in my willingness to be real, my willingness to not be an expert on their lives, which I'm not. Um, I would say generally people are open to it, but sometimes it takes certain people more time to get comfortable.
You know, I,
Everybody's different.
everybody's different. And I always say in my coaching practice when I'm sitting, I always tell people I sit in my chair ethically. Not because I'm void of having a life of all kinds of caca-ness and stuff. I'm not. So I sit in my chair ethically. I sit there because I've lived a life that, I can say, whoops,
Mm,
I understand that. And, I understand you could feel that way because, I understand it.
of
I've
course.
lived those things, a lot of those
Mm,
things. And I,
right, right.
and I know what it feels like to be on both sides of the desk, so to speak.
Yes, and that makes it a perfect
It
experience.
really does. It really
Mm,
does. So
yes.
there's so much I want to ask you, but I want you. So where we are right now in the interview or this chat, I should say, what else would you like to share with us that we have not touched upon yet? And I've never asked somebody that question before, but I feel that there's more to uncover, and I could keep going. But I want to know what is the most important things that we should bring up now.
Well, I think just it's important for me to emphasize that regardless of who we are, regardless, everything we think, everything we've done, everything we feel is part of a very human desire to feel safe, valuable, and connected. That doesn't mean that we think and that the things that we've done and think have been necessarily healthy things. They haven't even been necessarily legal, but they were done initially. The foundation of them is the spirit to survive and thrive. And that is the foundation we build on when we're looking for our magnificence. It's people are magnificent right now.
Yeah, and it's I know it's difficult for people
Hmm.
to live in the world with all the messages.
Yes.
So you are doing incredible work and helping people to build or see their strength, I guess I should say, um, in themselves so that they can live magnificently regardless of the messages.
Yes, and it's not a one-time realization.
Right.
And you, of course, Marilyn, you deal with that too. You know, people say, okay, well, now all right, I get that. It takes practice. Figure how long, how many minutes we have already practiced thinking otherwise. So to really change perspectives takes a practice plan where we are in daily reminder of our magnificence. Now, just a second, let me stop and think about that differently.
Right. And it does take time to really get into this whole concept of already well because it's not it sounds so it is profound and sounds easy, but you have to talk about it in so many different terms.
So many.
So many. So
And
many.
I suppose just lending a tool, what I say to my clients, if you want to think about things differently, you want to do things differently, as many reminders as you can have in your environment, the better. So I will have my clients turn a chair over in their dining room that stays there. I will have them put a big heart on the mirror in lipstick. I will have them spray a certain scent that they love in their
Mm,
room. I will have them change their furniture around. I will have them ask them to drive a different route to work. I will have them go to work and change around the configuration of the stuff on their desk. As many reminders as we can have in our environment, the better.
right.
I when I want to remember something, I will actually even set my alarm to a different time of the day to remind myself to think about things differently. So as many external reminders as we can place in our lives help us to remember to change how we're thinking.
Exactly. You're changing the energy of
Yes.
what's around. Beautiful. I see we have a question on the chat, which that there are some answers for, but I think we could maybe take it a little deeper. The difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist.
Okay. They're very different. Um, a psychiatrist is a medical doctor who specializes in mental illnesses. And a psychologist is not a medical doctor. A psychologist is trained in an entirely different way. Certainly, some of the areas cross over, and for example, understanding the brain, the way the brain functions, that would be similar. But a psychologist goes to school to understand um, motivation, to understand thinking, to understand behavior, excuse me, to understand emotion, um, to understand, is schooled in the different philosophies, really, of approaching feeling, behavior, and thinking. And a medical doctor's primary education is physical, just like a just like a general practitioner would get.
Hmm.
The
Perfect.
foundation of their education is as a medical doctor. The foundation of a psychologist's education is psychotherapy.
Yeah, I work. Actually, I've been fortunate enough to join a um, slash psychologist practice.
Mhm. Oh,
So
wow.
as a life and business coach, I'm really knock on wood. It's a real
That's
honor.
amazing.
It is amazing. It is
Mm-hmm.
amazing because they really have that foresight,
Right.
and it really is amazing. So I feel very fortunate to be able to do some of the work that I'm able to do and work with some of the
Yes.
people.
Which also goes to show that this practice is progressive, which I love.
Extreme, yes, very
Yes.
extremely, which
Well,
I love too. Yeah,
that was not an accident.
thank you. Thank you, because it's not. There's nothing to say. Thank you.
Right,
Thank
right.
you. Well, you're so happiness is what? What is so? Is happiness a place that we can spend some time in? Is happiness a human um, condition?
Yes and no, I
Okay.
think. Um, you had mentioned earlier about gratitude.
Yeah.
I think that, of course, happiness is different for each person. I watch my granddaughter, and happy for her is excited. I mean, I think that's what she would say. When she gets to go to Disneyland or she gets, to hunt for Easter eggs, she would say she was happy. Um, as human beings, I think uh, to feel fulfilled, to feel contentment, again, is a skill that we have to practice. And because everything is always relative, if we're in an environment where we have to have more of everything, regardless of what we have, it won't be enough. So I think practicing a perspective of enoughness, practicing, yes, it is part of the human condition, but we need to be mindful of it. As I said before, I think we're a blend of mammal and of spirit. And when those two things are balanced and integrated, we can find contentment. We generally, unfortunately, operate in survival mode.
Yeah.
And
And
when we op-
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go
which,
ahead. No, no. Go
when
ahead.
we operate in survival mode, we can't be happy.
Right. And I believe too that when you can do this, you then can make the changes that you want to make,
Yes,
which is
yes,
a big
exactly.
deal. You know.
Yes. And it comes from, I would so much rather in the world to be making positive change based on how magnificent I am than trying to make change based on how worthless and uh, and evil I am.
Well, I always tell people the world does look better out of rosy glasses.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, seriously, if I
Hmm.
don't care. Just put them on me,
Hmm.
and then let me work from there.
Yes.
Just put them
Yes.
on. So
Hmm.
we're almost going to be out of time in just a few minutes. So I would love you to share with everyone, um, how somebody would work with you, how they, do you work on the phone? Do you work over Skype? Is it always in person? What
Yeah.
could our audience get, or what could you give, or, let us know.
Yes, we have. I work with two other therapists, and we do work via Skype. We it's actually a different program than that, but we could talk about how to set that up for confidentiality. And we do work via the telephone as well, and of course in person if somebody happens to be here in California or Los Angeles.
And any books you've written, or any blogs, or anything like that.
I'm Twittering and Facebook, and we'll have a book coming out at the end of the year. And
Perfect.
certainly, if they want to come out here, they can come see the show and then join on into a workshop. It would be a great vacation for somebody.
Terrific. So for all of you listening, and there's many, many, many of you that know of someone, and it doesn't have to even be, from what I can understand, you don't have to have a diagnosis of
No.
something like schizophrenia or overeating, or any of those things. Depression is enough. Just not being happy is enough,
Hmm.
and enough to help for somebody to say you're already magnificent and wonderful. And I think we have a caller, right? Okay. Hello.
Yes. Hi. Hi. It's Chris.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Hello. I wanted to. I know we have just a few minutes. There's a question on the chat. Just wanted to be sure got to Dr. Jordan, and one of them is from Susie Annie, and she wanted to hear from the doctor about what's the difference between, we often hear about psychologists versus psychiatrists, but then she also wanted to know about social workers and how the
Okay.
social worker compares and contrasts to a psychologist in terms of training.
Okay. Um, well, one more thing. I think oftentimes people are very concerned about people's training, and no matter who you may be working with or deciding to go to, you can always interview any practitioner before you work with them. I really want to say that. And an LCSW, a licensed clinical social worker, and a marriage and family therapist, of which I am that also, are master's level degrees that also require a license. And a psychologist requires a doctoral degree and a different kind of license. So social workers and marriage and family therapists, psychologists, and also psychiatrists can all provide psychotherapy. And it's really, they're all well trained. And I really encourage a person to interview the person that they're thinking of working with, because it needs to be a good fit. But they're all skilled and all have if they're licensed, all have the legal credentials to provide psychotherapy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Chris?
Yeah, there's also, and thank you. There's
Sure.
another question if we have a minute, do we?
Okay, what is it?
Okay, it's a question also from the chat. If psychopaths and sociopaths are the most seriously ill, and yet they go undetected as a rule, how would Dr. Jordan recognize either of those, or can she?
Okay. Well, I wouldn't say they go generally undetected. I would say that it is possible to go undetected. I will tell you that generally speaking, in their lifetime, they will be detected. Unfortunately, it's sometimes after they've done a lot of damage. And I will tell you that sometimes they aren't detectable. I have had a couple very seriously ill people, and I wouldn't have known the difference. I think, generally speaking, that for most of us, when we encounter someone who is psychopathic, something doesn't quite feel right, and that we need to pay attention to our intuition. I don't know, I mean, that doesn't mean we jump up and say, gee, are you a psychopath? But that means that we pay attention to things that just seem too good all the time. And we do our best to avoid it. But it is a problem. There's no doubt about it. And psychopathology, go ahead.
Were you going to say something, Chris?
Oh,
No, go
Okay.
ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah.
but it is scary. And yes, they do exist. And yes, they can go undetected. Um, I'm old enough now that anyone that I suspected of being a psychopath or sociopathic, eventually things don't work out. We usually catch them up in some sort of a way. But that's not to say that they aren't dangerous and that they can't do damage, because they can. God bless them.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for answering the
Thanks,
question.
Chris.
Thank
Okay,
you for
bye,
being on
honey.
the show
Thank you.
today,
Bye.
Dr. Jordan.
Thanks.
Bye.
So with that, we are out of time, but I'm so delighted to have had the opportunity for you to be here. So I thank you so very much for speaking so clearly and eloquently about some things, and already well it's a wonderful concept.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a pleasure, and I want to thank everybody out there for listening and partaking. It's been lovely to have you as well. We always love having you. So please tune in each and every Monday to the Breaking Free Show at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. And obviously, we're all over the world, so we'd love to hear from you from wherever you are. And my name is Marilyn Shannon, and if you are looking to express yourself and you have a great idea, let me know. And I'll look forward to hearing from you soon. Marilyn Shannon at Marilyn at MarilynShannon.com. So with that, have a wonderful day and a great rest of your holiday. Bye-bye.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Health In with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Lessons of Vietnam with NCBVI members, The Tanya Love Show, Your Healthy Pet with Gisela DiCarlo. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com. Sponsored by Atomus.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters for professionals, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.